So welcome back to day 2 of the Critical Mixed Race Studies Conference. I hope your morning sessions were really invigorating and inspiring and that you had a great start to your day. We're going to begin our keynote in just a moment. Before we start, I want to make another announcement logistically and also for outside in the lobby. There are books still remaining from Dr. G. Reginald Daniels' library, his personal library, that we encourage you to take books. It'll be really hard for us to bring those back, so we want to encourage you to take a few books. Think about those that you might know in your community, and they're really special. So please do grab those before the end of the day. And so now we're going to begin our keynote. I have the pleasure of introducing who you've met last night through the awards ceremony, but formally introducing again, Dr. Myra Washington, who is our keynote for this year. So Myra Washington is the Assistant Vice President for Faculty at the University of Utah, where she is also an Associate Professor of Ethnic Studies. She works daily to highlight how having more and different ideas, experiences, bodies means a better, more expansive understanding of the world around us. Her research focuses on the intersection of race, identity, and culture. In her first book, Blasian Invasion, Racial Mixing in the Celebrity Industrial Complex, she examined mixed race Black Asian people as a way to critique current understandings of race in the U.S. She is invested in theorizing and putting into practice all of the ways community building happens, especially through highlighting how communities of color act in solidarity with each other, so we may work towards our collective liberation. So I'd like to invite Dr. Myra Washington to come join us at the podium. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Why is this so far away? Okay. Now I'm going to have to do a gangster lean, so no one judge me. All right. So I'm actually originally a media and cultural studies scholar, and I very rarely do a talk without some sort of slide deck and without clips. But after last night's AV debacle, I switched this around. So we're going to make it a little bit more interactive. There won't be any clips. So I think that we're all going to have a good time. So yes, so let's have a fun little ride. I want to begin by acknowledging the peoples of whose land I traveled through to get to this conference. I am coming from Utah, home of the Ute, Goshute, and Shoshone, and flew through Apache, Cheyenne, Arapaho, Pawnee, Omaha, Menominee, Peoria, Potawatomi, Anishinaabe, and Wyandot territories. And now here we are convening on Delaware, Miami, Seneca, and Shawnee lands. Obviously, educating ourselves about the tribal nations upon whose lands we occupy is only the first and easiest step. Harder still is building relationships and standing in solidarity with our kin, neighbors, friends, and colleagues to take actions that recognize their sovereignty, cultural heritage, rights to their lands, resources, and lives. Consider joining and supporting Indigenous-led and run organizations like the Native American Indian Center of Central Ohio, which is devoted to preserving and restoring balance in the lives of Native Americans through traditional, cultural, educational, family, community, and wellness-driven values and initiatives. And since land acknowledgements suck when there's no action, what I would love for you guys to do is take out your phones if you have your computers out and you're online. Google whose lands you occupy when you are back in your homes. So if you don't already know that, we're going to find out now. And then if you do know that, please Google what Native-led organization that you can participate in and join while you're at home. So we'll take a couple minutes because we're all about that action in here. So. And I will hum Jeopardy while you're doing it. No, I'm just kidding. And then if you want an easy shortcut, if you don't have the app, if you Google whosland.ca, and then you can just type in your zip code, state, city, university, any address, it will actually let you know. And that map has gotten much better over the years, so. I love it. I see some folks taking notes. That's what I like to see. So studious. Anyone having difficulties? Do we need to crowdsource this? No. All right. I want to also say that, of course, I connect Indigenous calls for reclaiming their land and resources to Palestinian solidarity and the return of their land and resources. And so I hope that you all will join me in hoping for a ceasefire and doing all that we can in support of the Palestinian cause. I must also recognize and acknowledge the labor upon which this country and our institutions are built. We remember that this country is built on the labor of enslaved people who were kidnapped and brought to the United States from the African continent, and recognize the continued contribution of their survivors. I also acknowledge all immigrant labor, including voluntary, involuntary, trafficked, forced, and undocumented peoples who contributed to the building of this country and continue to serve within the labor force. To the people who contributed this immeasurable work and their descendants, I acknowledge their indelible mark on the space in which we gather today. It is our collective responsibility to critically interrogate these histories, to repair harm, and to honor, protect, and sustain this land. Finally, a thank you to the CMRS board, especially to Victoria. The incredible amount of labor that they have poured into making this first in-person conference happen since COVID is deeply appreciated by me, and I hope by all of you and all of our friends who are joining us online. So if we can give them all a round of applause. All right. Where is the critical and critical mixed race studies? This is something that I think about actually all the time, which is weird and creepy, but it soothes me at night when I can't go to sleep. And I'm like, what is critical? I'm going to start with an example. Some of you have maybe seen this exchange online. If you want to see it this afternoon, you can just Google The Breakfast Club and Tyla, and you can see the video version. On Thursday, June 13th, so 2 days ago, South African singer Tyla was on The Breakfast Club, the morning show for New York City radio station Power 105, when she had this exchange with co-host Charlemagne the God. Charlemagne says, "School me on these debates that they be having about your identity as a South African colored person. What does that even mean?" Tyla turns around, looks at a member of her team sitting behind her in the studio. And then all you hear is a voice off camera who says, "Yeah, can we not, por favor?" So then Charlemagne the God says, "Oh, I like that. I like when they talk from the back and say we can't. I like that. We're keeping that." And then that ends, right, that little exchange. So that afternoon, Tyla posts on So in my head, I've been calling it shitter because one of my students was like, if you put the X in Twitter, it's shitter. So Tyla posted on Shitter a note that said, yeah, guys, never denied my Blackness. I don't know where that came from. I'm mixed with Black, Zulu, Irish, Mauritian, Indian, and colored. In South Africa, I would be classified as a colored woman, and other places, I would be classified as a Black woman. Race is classified differently in different parts of the world. I don't expect to be identified as colored outside of South Africa by anyone not comfortable doing so, because I understand the weight of that word outside of South Africa. But to close this conversation, I am both colored in South Africa and a Black woman. As a woman for the culture, it's and, not or. And then she says, with that being said, Asambe, which in Zulu means let's go. So I obviously love it because we are all about the and, not or in CMRS. And this debate was literally why I decided to go to grad school. So it was moments like this over the expansiveness or not of Blackness that drew me to mixed race studies. I knew when I was researching graduate programs that I wanted to do me-search, and that what it meant to be a mixed race Black and Asian person who had grown up between Seoul, South Korea and Atlanta, Georgia had not been articulated anywhere that I could find. We existed for sure after all the celebrities in my book, Blasian Invasion, were the ones that were around for my formative years. And the same tensions and contentions of Blackness, of mixedness, of bothness were circulating then as they continue to do now. And there was so much to unpack. So I thought to myself, who can help me unpack this? And I decided to go to the University of Illinois, which was where Ken Ono was. So at the time, he was chair of the Asian American Studies Department and was faculty in the Institute of Communications Research, which is where I got my PhD. I was already familiar with his work on mixed race Asian Americans, having read his Resigning Asian America, Rhetorical Problematics of Nation, and his edited collection, Asian American Studies After Critical Mass, as an undergrad. And it made sense that this mixed race Asian American would be able to show this mixed race Asian American how to navigate academia and to do the kind of research that I wanted to do. I can't even begin to convey the excitement I felt as we made our way through the classic multiracial studies canon with folks like Jane Ifekwunigwe, Ronald Sundstrom, Lewis Gordon, Naomi Zak, Maria Root, George Kitahara Kitch, Cynthia Nakashima, Gary Nash, Stephen Murphy Shigematsu, Teresa Williams-Leone, G. Reginald Daniel, Paul Spickard, and so many others. Following the movement of the field from embraces and critiques of hypodescent, aka the one drop rule, to psychology-rooted examinations of mixed race individuals, to tracking anti-Blackness's hold on families as they tried to figure out how their children should identify in ways that wouldn't mark them as Black, to pushing out strategies for solidarity and liberation was, for me, a heady time to dive into mixed race studies. When activist, scholar, and musician Fred Ho delivered a guest lecture in the last seminar I took as a grad student, he weaved together his theories of music, activism, race, revolution, and solidarity, and it felt surreal. Ho's use of discordant sounds and layers of chords not meant to be played together laid a foundation for a theory that I'm still nearly a decade and a half later trying to tease out and instrumentalize in a way that might push my own thinking of race, identities, and solidarities. Do we need harmony to beget solidarity? That is the question. So, there was the eye-opening and mind-blowing moment when we got to the research from my proto-Blasian progenitors, Michael Thornton and Christine Ajima Hall. And I don't know, especially for students, if you have started your academic hoarding phase, but you will find that you're gonna have boxes of binders from your classes with the PDFs and the notes that you've taken. And you're like, why am I moving this from house to house? Because you never know when you're gonna need it, like this moment. And so I was like, what did I write when I was in class? And then I could pull out the box and my binder. And so in there, in my notes, were a lot of expletives, but PG version, finally, non-white, mixed race Black people. Ejima Hall's dissertation had been dismissed at the time of its writing as stupid and worthless because no one saw value in understanding mixed race Black and Asian identity formation. When Thornton asked in his essay with the same name, is multiracial status unique? In the margins of that piece, I wrote in all caps, no, but then put in parentheses, maybe, then definitely, probably, yes, and then I scratched it all out and then I put, it depends. When he wrote about how impossible it was to separate race from culture and biology, it all came together for me. And that was when I wrote, it depends. The founding of Critical Mixed Race Studies Association happened at the most auspicious time for me. I had finished coursework. I did my comprehensive exams. The dissertation was underway. I was on easy street. There was a lot of People's Court and Judge Judy in the afternoon. I don't know why. I was like right in the morning. And then I was like, what a treat, Judge Judy. So Kent tells me about a conference happening in the fall of 2010, just up the street from us in Chicago. And it was focused only on mixed race people and topics. So by the mid to late 2000s, a steady stream of research on mixed race people, interracial relationships, transnational adoptions, and global multiculturalism, plus the historic election of Barack Obama, seemed to all come together at just the right time for the formation of multiracial studies as a field. I didn't know it then, but this thing drummed up by Laura Kina, Wei-Ming Dariotis, and Camilla Fojas would provide me with a lifetime of interlocutors and a generous community of scholars, activists, and creatives whose own thinking of race, identity, and culture would necessarily force me to think more deeply and strategically. This would also provide me with my crew of Blasian academics whose experiences weren't similar, but were familiar, and to whom I will be forever indebted for helping shape my work. I submitted my chapter on Blasian NFL player Hines Ward and was placed on a panel with my now friend Chinelo Njaka. Her comparison of mixed race studies as a field in the US versus the UK sent me spiraling as I realized just how limited and US-centric my analysis of Ward had been. The first CMRS conference was stacked with folks in the more contemporary canon of multiracial studies, and the second, more critically oriented wave of mixed race scholars whose work had provided the framing for my dissertation were now in front of me. So I don't know if you guys nerd out. I nerd out all the time. I definitely was nerding out at this first CMRS. So Rolina Joseph, Sika Dagbogi, Leilani Nashime, Gregory Carter, Catherine Squires discussing critical mixed race African-American media studies. Yes, please. Kelly Jackson, Rudy Guevara, Manel Matani, A.B. Wilkinson, Michelle Lam, Habiba Ibrahim, Mary Beltran, and Mark Johnston Guerrero doing deep dives on methods and theories that might be more useful for CMRS scholars. Fuck yeah. The Black Pacific is an important site of analyses as laid out by Natasha Sharma, Ethan Caldwell, Mitzi Uhara Carter, coupled with Jasmine Mitchell and Daniel McNeil's push for consideration of the Black Atlantic and its utility for mixed race studies meant it was impossible to not think about the geographies and movement and empire when thinking about mixed race. The importance of reach of community-based organizations is highlighted by people like Fanchon Cox, Jennifer Noble, Cindy Howe, and the artist activist Alejandro Acerto rounded out my first CMRS conference. There were critiques of multiracial politics structured around heteronormative family structures, historization of the biracial baby boom, and the rise of multiculturalism, and a push away from the individual and towards a critique of the structural. And actually, if I'm honest, and I took this out, but we're going to put it back in because I'm going to talk about it. My most formative memory of that first CMRS was Jared Sexton was on a panel to talk about amalgamation schemes, and he did not love a critique that he got of his book. And so he spent his entire time being an asshole. And I was like, what? Can faculty do this? And Kent was like, absolutely not. You will not go out in this world. But I remember I was like, wow, you can just shit on your haters in a panel. And I was inspired. So So if you guys ever see Jared Sexton, you should let him know that sometimes I try to channel him. I left that first conference with the feeling that I was doing the right research at just the right time, surrounded by the right people. In all that I got to be in conversation over multiple days with people I had admired from afar, with new scholarship to dig into, and a booming, excited community of multiracialists ready to offer feedback and hype for my own work, just left me on cloud nine. Wei Mi shared yesterday that part of the impetus for starting CMRS was to ensure that there was a conference organized not by students that would engender institutionalized recognition of the extremely interdisciplinary work that we are doing in what was still a nascent field. While Wei Ming, Laura, and Camilla were banking on about 50 scholars, artists, and activists to participate, they ended up with over 200 people from all over the world. Oh shit, at the first one? Okay, I'm gonna make that note. I will make that note in here. Okay. With 500 people from all over the world. As they wrote in the program, the 2010 CMRS conference theme, Emerging Paradigms in Critical Mixed Race Studies, is focused on the transracial, transdisciplinary, and transnational critical analysis of the institutionalization of social, cultural, and political orders based on dominant conceptions of race. CMRS emphasizes the mutability of race and the porosity of racial boundaries in order to critique processes of racialization and social stratification based on race. CMRS addresses local and global systemic injustices rooted in systems of racialization, end quote. Yet and still, I wondered if the focus on the trans, whether racial, disciplinary, national, obscured the sort of problematic, non-egalitarian implications and the impact that it had on mixed raceness. And wouldn't you know it, that was the question we took up in the second CMRS conference. So this would again take place at DePaul University in Chicago 2 years later in 2012. The imperative of the CMRS to address local and global systemic injustices was visible in the international roster of participants and the global focus of presentations. It was at this conference where scholars like Rebecca Shioko King Orion, Zeli, who says hello and couldn't be here today because she's in Korea, Rebus, Yuri Doolin, and Kimberly McKee forced me to really grapple with the situatedness of race and the transnational movements that made a mockery of any attempt to settle racial identities into neat categories for easy consumption. Rebecca would later go on to coin the term transconnective practices to open a space for new global imaginations to thrive in order to discuss and better understand what is meant by mixed race through international comparisons and dialogue. It was also at this conference that Mixed Root Stories becomes an official partner, and with it, folks like Sandra Crudup enter into the CMRS orbit. At that conference, I worked through a chapter of my manuscript focused on Tiger Woods, and the universe made sure that the two panelists who were with me would serve as reviewers for my book. So when it was ready for publishing, I had a pipeline already set. Between the first and second CMRS conference was the launch of the Journal of Critical Mixed Race Studies. In that inaugural issue, co-editor G. Reginald Daniel and CMRS founders Laura Kina, Wei Ming Dariotis, and Camilla Fojas write, quote, critical mixed race studies places mixed race at the critical center of focus. Multiracials become subjects of historical, social, and cultural processes rather than simply objects of analysis. This involves the study of racial consciousness among racially mixed people, the world in which they live, and the ideological, social, economic, and political forces, as well as policies that impact the social location of mixed race individuals and inform their mixed race identities and experiences. CMRS also stresses the critical analysis of the institutionalization of social, cultural, political structures based on dominant conceptions of race. After a dormant phase, I have heard that it is coming back. True or false? Friends. Yeah. Look at that. See? I'm like, what is it? SpawnCon. I'm just gonna plug all the things that are happening in this talk. Like clockwork, the third CMRS conference happens in 2014, still at DePaul, still during the wintertime in Chicago. This is the year CMRS becomes an association, complete with a fiscal sponsor and the ability to take in and raise money. This is also the year there's an explicit call for embracing a global mixed race and for transforming the CMRS mission statement into scholarly practice. The list of conference participants continues to grow, and as envisioned, so do our networks as we connect with each other. At this conference, I present on the Comedy Central sketch show, Key and Peele, and afterwards, historian Guy Emerson Mount, if you guys haven't met him, he is a delight, helps me think through a huge glaring hole in my theorizing about the possibility of a mixed race sensibility by pointing out that different audiences are different. It sounded so basic and obvious, but it was through this contextualization and his example of Black people in attendance at minstrel shows that gave me a way to examine how folks might find pleasure in something meant to harm them. Could there be a mixed race consciousness? Would folks have to be mixed race in order to embrace and deploy this consciousness, or would it be a sort of political mixed raceness, not dissimilar to the political Blackness popular with Black and Asian communities in the UK, particularly in the 80s and 90s? This question also keeps me up at night, and I do not have an answer to it. At least that I like enough to publish. So if you do have an answer, please share it with me in the Q&A. I'm going to steal it and then claim it as mine. I'm just kidding. I'll cite you. The fourth CMRS conference finds itself on the move away from cold Chicago in the winter to sunny Southern California. The University of Southern California hosts the conference, and there is a huge increase in participants, but especially in student participants. I sit on presentations from brilliant grad students like Ju Young Lee, who examines representations of Black Korean celebrities, and Anna Storti, who dissects the Daniel Holtzclaw case. CMRS feels alive. The student affairs practitioners like Nalia Kaya, Nana Osikofi, and Charlene Martinez are in full force, demonstrating what a critical mixed race praxis looks like in a day-to-day setting and the impact that it has on the real lived realities of our students. But it also begins to feel a little disjointed. I wonder what it means to be a part of an association that critiques essentialist notions of race and gender out of one side of its mouth, while the other more creative side of its mouth is producing films and showing shorts that does the very thing that we're critiquing. Does the association need to be on the same page for everything, or can there be an embrace of narratives around hybrid vigor, or the utility of the one-drop rule, or the continued use of the idea that we as mixed people exist in terms of fractions rather than as our whole selves? My answer to that is no. It has been no, continues to be no, but I might be swayed. So if your answer is yes, I would love to hear your thoughts on that. The fifth CMRS conference happens squarely in the middle of the Trump administration and takes place just up the street from Washington, D.C. at the University of Maryland. And the theme is fittingly about the resistance to white supremacy around the globe and the affirming ethics of love from which we should operate. The association had just held its first elections. And I'm going to pause here and remind you that all of the positions are available. So if you did not fill out the little thing, Victoria is going to put up the QR code. And if you envision yourself as the next president of CMRS, this is your opportunity. Or vice president, or secretary, or treasurer, or grad student rep, community liaison. Am I missing anything else, Victoria? Global rep. Multiple grad reps. Look at that. We have room for everybody under the tent. Oh, do we still use social media? Okay, all right. So 3 people do. So social media coordinator, you're going to hit those 3 people. But I do want to champion both nominations. Please nominate your friends, nominate yourselves. I already nominated some people, so I am petty like that. I will nominate you too if you want me to. All right. So here, CMRS has recommitted to its original mission for envisioning critical mixed race studies as laid out by Wei Ming, Laura, and Camilla. During this conference, I worked through a piece on Trevor Noah and racial liminality in post-apartheid South Africa. During the Q&A for the panel, we are treated to an entire 20-minute tear-filled monologue from an audience participant who is both angry with my analysis but grateful for the paper. It is at this moment that I realize every CMRS conference has involved tears from a participant in a session that I have been in, though I would like to think that I am the tear maker. Based on conversations with others, I know that it's not unique to me. So many tears in so many sessions. And I wonder what it is about mixed race studies, or at least the way we're talking about multiraciality that brings on these tears. In drawing themes from what folks have shared, there's certainly a lot of trauma in the navigating and negotiating of identities. The treatment meted out based on how well or not people have managed to fit into various groups has done major damage to the psyches of so many in attendance. And for me, it called back to the early work in mixed race studies that focused on multiracial people as damaged, mentally unwell, unstable, and troubled. Though we're not the only people to have to constantly navigate our way through life, maybe it is a testament to CMRS and the spaces we create during each conference that makes it feel safe enough for people to feel all the feels. So here I put insert break because first part of our interactive time, you guys are going to meet each other. That is the joy of being at CMRS. And I hope that you all have been making friends. These are the people who you will take with you, students, through the rest of your career in academia, practitioners who you can call on for support, folks that you can cry to. If you need to send an expletive-filled email, many of these people will accept them. So please introduce yourselves. If you don't know the people at your table, if you do, find someone else you don't know. We're going to take a couple minutes. So let's do this. Let's make a little community. Y'all want a few more minutes? Are we feeling 2 more, 3 more? Okay, I got you. 3 more minutes. Hey, friends, I'll give you more time at the end. But also I see lunch coming in, so I don't want to hold up lunch. I saw so many smiles during that little mingling that it made me so happy, and I will carry that with me on my saddest of days. All right, so getting back to our little historiography of CMRS. The sixth conference, our COVID conference, meant to be held in person at Arizona State, happened instead online. What was super interesting for me about that conference was I had transitioned to my current institution and was 100% admin at that point. ethnic studies had asked if I would teach a mixed race studies class because turns out Mormons love interracial relationships, and there are many mixed race Mormons in Salt Lake. So I was teaching a critical mixed race studies course when the online critical mixed race studies conference was happening. So instead of taking them to ASU, I was excited that it came to us. The most remarkable part of that conference was a real-time glimpse into the generational changes happening in critical mixed race studies as a field. Though there were some names from conferences past, the majority of the presenters were new, if not to the field, then at least to the conference. And now we've made it to our 7th CMRS conference here at Ohio State. We are hybrid and have recaptured some of that magic of being back in person. This is why I wanted you all to meet the folks who you are around, because that is the magic. The shift that I saw happening during the ASU CMRS conference has been fully realized. There were a number of familiar names in the program, but overwhelmingly, the names are new. The presentations I watched via the live streams were building on the work of folks who had presented and were active in previous conferences. The questions, new theories, generative, and the application of this work was so exciting for me to hear. It is fitting that the first person I saw as I got to the hotel was Stephen Riley. He literally just left. Just left. Though I've named a number of folks, my list of scholars, thinkers, organizers, and artists is not meant to be exhaustive, and I wanted to save Stephen for last. For anyone doing a Google on mixed race studies, it is mixedracestudies.org that comes up first. It's probably that website, maybe the Facebook. I don't know if people still use Facebook, but I do see the link sometimes. The sites are maintained by Stephen, who has been at every single CMRS conference and has been involved with the association from its start. He somehow manages to be everywhere with his camera, capturing and preserving moments from our conferences. His photos are no doubt a testament to our growth, the changes within our association, and our reactions to the changes happening in the world around us. So if we could one more time, let's give Stephen a round of applause. To be honest, when I started writing this keynote, it was headed down a different direction. I really was channeling my inner Jared Sexton. It was super critical, probably a little bit sassy. But the more I wrote, the more I realized that the critical mixed race studies has been here since its inception. The way we think, beyond the bounds of our disciplinary homes, and always with each other, necessitates a critical orientation to the work that we do. The way we are generous with each other, hold space, and oftentimes tears and other big feelings, forces us to draw from an ethic of care that I have yet to see replicated in any other academic association or convening. We embody ancestries, histories, experiences, and dreams that have always been global, transgressive, and sometimes even revolutionary. So I will close with some words again from our trio of founders. From the inaugural conference, on was the vision for increased relationships between scholars, artists, and community organizers, perhaps even partnerships for new projects, be they scholarly, artistic, activists, or all three. We envision increased visibility and critical analyses of mixed race. I think Laura, Camilla, and Wei Ming are pleased with where we have ended up. Okay. So this is my love letter to us. We are the critical and critical mixed race studies. I love us. I hope you love us. And together, we'll push this into a new realm. So I can't wait to see what other work comes out from here. I hope that you all continue to be in community with each other, even as we leave. And that you'll be each other's anonymous reviewers on your manuscripts. So thank you so much for having me. I didn't even put on heels. I think Q&A time is happening and then lunchtime. So let's question it up if you guys have it, or you can share. I love a little share. And there's a mic. Or I can sing you a song. Although we've come. Oh no, okay.
Hi, thank you so much for this keynote. I think it's one of the best keynotes I've ever seen. Anything that has laughter, joy, tears all at once. Just brilliant. I think that represents this entire conference experience so far. I was really interested in the topic of a mixed race consciousness. Is there a global mixed race community or even national identities or even in like local identity community formations is where a lot of my work's really interested in, hoping to kind of explore that in future research. So I was just wondering kind of what your stance would be on if there is a global mixed race consciousness, or if there is, what mixed race community might mean for you in your own local context. Just anything in that kind of realm would be really interesting to hear.
Yeah, that's a great question. My academic brain says no, that there is not a mixed race consciousness and that there cannot be, but I want there to be. And the reason why I would love for that to exist would be because then that means that we have a recognition of where we're each from, but that doesn't matter, right? We don't have to have a shared ancestry, history, geospatial location in order to share an understanding of the way that power works, maybe to pit us against each other, the way that power works to strip us of our ability to embrace all of the ands that are in our identities and how we want to identify. And also, I wish that there was, so then people would be like, wait, I didn't know he was Black, but then it doesn't matter because global consciousness. So I wish that there was. I know that there's not, but can we get there? I don't know. That's what I'm struggling through. If anyone else has thoughts, what do you think?
I would say that there is a kind of mycelial network, if you will, of mixedness that is really hard to perceive, but I know it when I see it. And I think I wrote a couple things about the idea of a kin aesthetic, right? That as mixed race people, when we see each other, we recognize one another at a kin level. And even though there's that famous phrase, kinfolk or skinfolk aren't kinfolk necessarily, but there's something about, it's a shared experience of maybe being excluded or maybe being outside our own families in a way that has driven that. So that I have found people that I resonate with and I feel like they are my siblings, and that is something that has driven a lot of my work professionally and also those personal relationships. So I would say on that level, there is something that draws people together when they have that mixed, or when they discover their shared mixedness, even when it isn't about sharing a specific ethnic background.
Mm-hmm.
So speaking of social media, I want to get your opinion on this. I feel that a lot of times on social media, people will pop up new accounts, new people, and they say, oh my gosh, I've been looking everywhere and there's like nothing on my experience. So I decided to start this account because, and they have no knowledge of, that's what they sound like. They have, I just want to know what you think. Why does this continue to happen? Like for the last 20 years, people keep popping up saying, there was nothing. I looked and there's nothing. And also, what are people searching? I want to know, what are you searching that you're not landing on Stephen Riley, that you're not landing on this? And yeah, why do people feel they're not finding their experience and then connecting to this larger community?
I mean, I feel like you're asking the wrong person, so I'll open it up to you all. Why are you guys not finding things? There's an answer here from a young person. We will learn.
Yay, I can. Yay, wait.
Oh, yeah.
Yay, I can still be a young person. Okay. I think like part of that is because that's definitely something I struggled with because like it's not until like graduate school, but like I found a lot of this information. I was like, wow, there's like a whole like field of study about this, and people have been doing this, and there's so many like books and texts and things like that that I didn't recognize. But I think it's also just because like I don't know, I feel like our society does not equip us with like the information or the knowledge to know how to seek that out or even just to understand that. Like, for example, and I don't know if this is everyone's experience, but like, for example, like my own parents did not give me identity, like racial identity formation. Like, they didn't equip me with that personally because a lot of people are very similar. Still, a lot of people are very like self-loathing, and there's a lot of that. So, like, personally, I didn't even know I was Chinese until like halfway through elementary school because like I was like, I'm confused. Which sounds like ridiculous, but like, you know, it's like if no one says anything, you don't really know. And so there's certain things or words that you don't have the language for until you're much older or have the access to resources. And I think for a lot of people, like, you know, a lot of academic texts are behind like paywalls where people are doing a lot of this like really interesting work. Not that people aren't doing this in like activism and doing this like online and stuff like that, but sometimes it is really, you know, we are really limited, especially with social media and the things that we see. And so it seems easy to just be able to put in a keyword and be like, oh, I specifically want to learn about the history of Chinese Jamaicans. But then I learned like that was actually quite difficult. And I couldn't find out more about my own history if it wasn't for, you know, behind paywalls or things like that, or even like the shared history. And so like, yeah, there's little things like that. So I could have totally seen myself like when I was like a little baby master student being like, yeah, I'm the first Chinese Jamaican scholar in my field. And I learned shortly thereafter, I was like, no, there's like two others that have come before me. That's okay. Yeah, so I think it's like, I personally don't get upset by that. I'm personally just like, oh, I think that's like, I like that process of discovery for people. And I hope at some point that's not the case where someone can just like easily find someone and be like, I can find this information. Yeah.
Names and pronouns. I want to add to that, thinking about access. So if I know I'm mixed race, but what are the other terms in academia that are used to describe those identities or the nuances? Like I know what comes up in my body, but if I don't know the terms, then I can't search for it. And social media can be overwhelming. So then it could be a place to go or a place to avoid. I also think about access to folks that don't speak English, or maybe it's their second language. For those who are deaf or hard of hearing, or use American Sign Language. So then those nuances play for me are very critical. Also thinking about maybe globally for folks who have experience, have mixed race parents, maybe in the context for me for the Philippines, when I was looking at things for the Philippines, they're mostly on Facebook. But then if we're looking for their scholarly work in different countries, what does our look like? Their ethics are a little bit differently. So I think those dynamics, for me as an introvert, the space is perfect. So it's accessible for me. There was another question that I wanted to add, but if anyone wants to continue on answering this, that's fine. My other question was, as you were plugging the actions for the others think what qualities or types of leadership you may need for the next board, what you're looking for them to take it, what dreams do you have? Just kind of thinking about what that would look like.
I have no dreams. I'm an administrator, so. I'm kidding. I think the only quality is an enthusiasm for this work and for us. So everything else you can learn because Victoria is going to help you.
Hi, I'm Kirsten, and I'm a writer by trade. I also teach creative writing, and it may feel reductive to say this, a room full of mixed people, but we need to share our stories. We need to, in any medium, any form, we need to make our voices heard. We tend to all be so isolated or siloed, and it seems that everyone is craving community and connection. But a lot of those people, like the young people that you're talking about, not academics, or they're fledgling, they're beginning their journey into identity discovery. And we find that connection through poetry, fiction, essays, dance, music, performance, like spoken word, all of it is a medium for us to continue, making connections, opening up space for conversations to continue. And even if you do not consider yourself a writer or creative or an artist or whatever, your voice is essential in the conversation. And I think however you can contribute to it, to make your experience known, to like raise your hand, and say, hey, I'm here. And what I have to say matters too. Then it opens doors for these people who are looking and trying to figure out, like, where do I fit in? Where do I find people that share my experience or know my story and feel less alone, less isolated? So share your stories.
That's out. Hi, my name is Christmas, like the holiday, she, her pronouns. Just to piggyback on that, my master's defense was all interviews, and I did Afro-Asian couples and new parents. And I did that because I think it's important to put a face for people to see and hear the experiences of people falling in love that aren't contingent on war or military placement, but people who just went into the world, found each other, decided to start families and to start roots, or like to uplift themselves from wherever country they came from to anchor to a new country in order to maintain that relationship. So I'm doing those interviews, so maybe next conference I can just do interviews for everybody who wants to do it, or if you're in California, we can do it now. Just throwing that out there. I would love to do it, and then we could just put it on social media and do YouTube and like have it be there forever on their data. Anyway, so I had a question. I am a baby researcher. I just finished my master's in Asian American Studies. I actually graduate tomorrow. So I was asking for help in planning my life. And so the first question that I always like to ask people with experience is, what advice would you wish you would have known at my place in life, looking at PhDs, looking at how to be a contributor in critical mixed race studies. All my research is pretty much Afro-Asian, Afro-Korean connections in the US through familial ties, and then I do the Afro-Korean outcomes for the Korean transnational adoptees. So those are my two major foundational projects, but I don't really know what to do now. Everyone's like, PhD. I'm like, great. And then Ms. Myra gave me a beautiful list, and a majority of those people I was told were in attendance here. So that was long-winded, but any advice that you wish you would have had? Any advice you want to give me about PhDs as people who have already done through it? And then, yeah, anything that you feel like you want new young researchers to know that could be helpful in contributing to our beautiful field. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Joe has his hand up in the back to give you advice. While he's waiting for the mic, I would say pick somewhere where there are people you want to date, because everyone gets their due in grad school. I know there's going to be so many fish in the sea after grad school. It's a lie. No, you got to meet your boo in grad school. That is my advice.
Hey, so I was in your position in 2010. I went to the first conference, just got my master's. I'm like, what am I going to do with this thing? And I actually was turned off of academia because of it. I was like, well, this doesn't feel like we're going to take this to the streets. Like, what are we doing? So I became an activist and an organizer. I worked for the union for over a decade, organizing adjuncts. And what I was saying, thanks. And New York, Connecticut, all over the Midwest, et cetera. So I would say that there's a bunch of paths that you have. You can still keep what you've studied. You know, it was on mixed race individualism in work. It was the first work-related study that somebody threw out there at the conference. And what I did was I used that and organized people at work. And I'm still doing that. I've never gotten into academia, been an activist my whole life. So in the beginning, it pays better. I will tell you that. But that doesn't mean that you have to give up on your research or anything that you're doing. It just means that you can kind of delay it and use it in the field, is what I would say.
Hello? Okay, hi. Academia is not a merit-based system. That's number one. I wish somebody had told me that. It is a system deeply embedded with intersectional racism and sexism. Black women, Asian American women, and Latinas have the highest being pushed off the tenure pathway rate. And it is a killing machine for us, meaning that there are high rates, I'm sorry, high rates of death, suicide, and depression. Having said all of that, I still think that we need to forge ahead, and if we can, make a space for ourselves. And the way to do that is to form deep friendships to sustain us. I have a system of comadres from my graduate school cohort, and also in my department in Asian American Studies. We literally went through a coup of the patriarchal leadership in our department. We sustained one another. We deliberately co-published with one another. We supported each other emotionally and professionally on purpose. We said it out loud. We did it on purpose, and then we spread it around as much as we possibly could. And this might sound controversial, but I am just going to say this anyway, because I did wait too long. If you want to have biological children, don't wait until you've achieved some level in your profession to do it.
Okay. I'm Luke Tripp. I'm a professor at St. Cloud State University. I've been teaching there for about 35 years. The previous 7 years, I taught at the University of Illinois in the Southern Illinois University for 7 years. And I got fired from that position. I was working there during the 1980s. I was organizing boycotts and confrontations with the trustees around apartheid in South Africa. I also had confrontations with them because of the administration decided to dismantle the Black American Studies program, which I was in charge of. Okay, I came into higher education through struggle. You know, when I was undergrad and all, I was in my
discipline, I was in STEM, in math and physics, right? And I grew up during the period of the beginning of the citizens movement. And I became one of on the front lines with those 4 students in Greensboro, North Carolina. I was their peer, you know. They inspired me, and I became active at age 19. And I've been involved in the struggle since those civil rights struggles, right? Through the Black rebellions, you know, Black Power, you know. I was in the Black Panther Party, you know, Minister of Education there, and the members and founders of the League of Revolutionary Black Workers, organizing Black workers in the Motor City. That's about a strategic plan that auto industry was key in the industrial, and if we can organize those Black workers, because there was rigid segregation within the UAW in all areas, right? But one of the points is I didn't go from undergrad straight into grad school. It was all of this kind of involvement on the streets, battling the system, right? I earned a master's degree at the University of Michigan and earned my PhD in the University of Michigan. And I went through higher education through struggle. And as I said before, I had no aspirations to become a university professor. So I'm going to address your question. What should you know about higher education, the structure of higher education? You already know that there is a hierarchy, right? From the elite down to the community colleges, right? And so my idea was to get the credentials so I can employ, but basically organize. How do we organize the community for struggle? All right. Here's some things that you should know about higher education and about faculty members, right? And I think you described some of them. First of all, faculty members are human beings. Do not put them on a pedestal. You get some of the most vicious, mean, backbiting folks, right? They will try to put an obstacle in your way. And you have some that are very supportive, mentoring. They're human beings. You got a mixed bag, right? Some of them can relate and embrace you. In other words, will put stumbling blocks, particularly as you're a woman of a color. Number 2, there's anybody in higher education in faculty, all kind of biting, you know, okay, and they were, so you have to really understand how that these institutions operate. First and foremost, as you all know, the higher education, those models are corporate models. They're bottom line models. I mean, I'm going to show you how bottom line they are, and they don't have to be private institutions. Last week, the retrenchment plan at St. Cloud State University went into effect. Okay. Who was hit? They gave notice to 57 faculty members. Now, I'm in the Department of Ethnic Studies and Women's Studies. Right? We have 4 faculty members in Ethnic Studies, 1 gone. And one thing that really surprised me with the Women's Studies, they have 2 tenured faculty members, right? The one who was gone, I just mentioned, was tenured in there at least 20 years. And we have a faculty union. So they had to get rid, you know, the budget line. You go up and think basically like mixed race, a new territory, intellectual, you know, pioneers, all that sort of thing. Hey, they're looking at the corporate model, FTEs, you know, your production, and how well does your program feed into corporate America, into the economy? So you go in there to a lot of people, a lot of faculty members go in there naive and, you know, have all these ideas coming from liberal education about values and human value. Hey, you need a reorientation. You live in a capitalist society. You have institutions that are capitalist, and that's what you're fighting for human values. They're looking at bottom lines. They're looking for profits. So to be real with that, you know, they go up there, you know, hug the literature and all that. Hey, it's not gonna get real. Always remember, you're in a capitalist society. They like that. Oh, what does the economics look like? And then, you know, and that kind of grounds you as you begin to stratify. So if you're just gonna float people with your brilliant your writings or literature, hey, not gonna happen. All right. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Panita Khanna, and actually I have a lot of comments. Thanks, Luke, for that. So as you all were talking about higher education, I'm not in higher education, but I have double masters. I grew up in Chicago. So one is from University of Chicago, and then my MBA is from UCLA, and I worked in corporate America. So I was nodding, and I wanted to actually tell, yeah, what you're feeling or what you said is no different. But I would always say, you know, they didn't look. First thing is, it's white women. It's like women. And then I walked in, it's like, okay, you've got the double barrier of you're a woman and you're a person of color. So everything that everybody said about barriers and discrimination, it's still real. It's that. And my mentors were white women that were older than me. I'm older, so they felt it all, because the first people that paved the way were really white women in corporate America. They had to fight so hard to not be secretaries and get a director level and get a VP. And the first people to go always, when layoffs, are always the women. But besides that, so I'm always conflicted because I heard their stories, but I do have to say that in the one place where I stayed 15 years, my two biggest supporters were white men and a Mormon, which if you told a short white Mormon man, my boss, who was told to hire me by the CEO, who was Protestant, that I would come in and stay with them for 15 years and they'd be my biggest supporters, it would never fly as a movie script. But the Mormon boss and I became really good friends, the values. Plus, I have to say, I'm a brown girl. I put my head down. I worked my butt off. And they knew that, and I got rewarded financially. So I had to make a decision. Okay, do I say stuff? I didn't say stuff, but I did get paid well. But they know how hard I work, 6 days a week, 12 hours a day. But they were there to support me every way. So that's one point to get back to everything that's out there. But the other point the two of you made that I wanted to get back about sharing stories. Some of you know me from last night. I accepted the award on behalf of my son, talked about it, Rahul Yates, who was a social media coordinator, who's mixed race. My husband's white. So for 20 years, we've lived this unfolding of identity. And I think it was easier for me to understand it because I'm loosely a third culture kid. My parents immigrated from India. We grew up as the Indian society grew up here. So when I grew up in Chicago, there were no Indians. I grew up in Rogers Park, which is Jewish, right? We had a rabbi as a tenant. I always say I grew up Jewish. We didn't have Indian culture. We didn't have anything like that or an extended community to even reach out to. So when I married John and I married late, back to your thing about children and late in career, when you're working that many hours, you don't date, you don't get married. If you don't find him by graduate school, it's 40. I met my husband on my 40th birthday. So you can see how old I am because Rahul's almost 20. You know? But so being cognizant that I'm raising a multiracial child and where and how do I do this? But I'm brown presenting and I had an Indian community, but his colors between the two of us. So I did make a concerted effort, say we're going to do Indian things, we're going to do American things. I don't speak the language. I don't know anything. There wasn't a community when I was growing up. So I had to kind of find it for him. And I was Googling multiracial, like I didn't even have language. I didn't have anything and I had nobody in my purview. I found Mask, and some of you have heard that story. We've been with them for 15 years in Southern California. But what we didn't find, some of you that were teenagers or something, as Rahul was growing up, up until 12 or 13, if you asked him what he was, he'd say, I'm Indian. That was it. And we used, we talked about race. We would say we would use half and half, which I know is not a good terminology anymore. But, he would say, and then as teenagers go through their own identity, he started, and I think through the language and the peer panels that he did with masks, started saying, I'm mixed race, I'm multiracial. He did an internship with masks. I think we grew as a community grew, and he built a platform for youth that was online. Fortunately, we were all at home during the pandemic. 1,200 kids around the world. I mean, he had people zooming into his panels and all different mixes, and the kids would talk without adults. Because what he found was there were adults out there, there were organizations, but there was nothing for kids to talk about. And he had learned from Mask how to do peer-to-peer panels. So he was doing those. He's got an online platform he built. But back to telling stories, the one group that he never saw, stories out there were multiracial South Asians. So while he was similarities between various communities, we didn't find our community. John and I never had a community because there's discrimination with South Asians, there's caste, colorism, there's all that stuff. So that wasn't going to fly. And I didn't grow up with that. And, John was okay with everything, but I wanted a group that we could talk to. We didn't find it. So hence, through the work that we'd been doing, the one thing is we reached out through Rahul's platform, and we now published multiracial mixed ACs, stories of multiracial South Asians. But what's more important about this, and I've got it to show people, is the stories. And you were talking about stories. It's ages teens to women in their 70s who had never been asked, what does it mean? And the two groups that we talk that are featured in the book are those in interracial relationships and multiracial South Asian. So it could be Black men talking about marrying a South Asian woman. It's the white woman who 50 years ago, right after loving Virginia was repealed, married the Indian man who was too afraid to tell his relatives in India he's marrying a white girl. And now they're telling their stories. So what you said and what you read the stories are, and the teenagers and the youth and the 12-year-old who's writing, nobody asked me. Nobody I know looks like me until we put that out in my multiracial South Asians. Nobody asked us to tell our stories because we're kind of lost in this whole mix of the first generation are Black, white, and then there's Latinos, and there's this, and our community is small, but now we're telling our stories. And there's a lot, we found out, a lot of Indian women marry Black men. So you were talking about like Asian, I was like, but do you know about the South Asian women? And there's a whole history between the civil rights movement and the Asian Indians in this country. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I know there are a lot of more questions in the audience, but we've got to wrap this up because the session ends at 12:15. I encourage you to, if you have more questions or want to engage in discussion, this room will be open for lunch. I was going to pass it to you for a question, but because we're ending at 12:15, is that okay?
See, I'm going to chat you an answer.
Perfect, great. So just a couple announcements. First, I want to give my warmest gratitude to Dr. Myra Washington for being our plenary speaker. Thank you so much. Yes. So one of my favorite statistics I read a long time ago, so I'm not even sure if it's true anymore, is that on the survey, people indicated that they went 7 days without being thanked. That's like how much time most people go. And so I really want to thank you, Dr. Myra Washington. I know that we don't know each other well, but you're a scholar that I've looked up to since I've started. So thank you for everything and for your
Am I old now?
No, but thank you so much for everything you've contributed to CMRS, and we appreciate you being here.